What's up, everybody? My name is Keilan Morrissey, and you're watching Keeping It Keilan. First things first, hope everybody liked the new intro there. Put a little work into that one. And hope you guys like these posters I got up behind me. I had some art that my girlfriend had drawn for me on that wall back there, and I realized that a lot of it was copyrighted characters, so I decided to move that off screen over there and put up some posters for my movies, which are obviously not copyrighted. So I hope everybody enjoys getting a look at those guys. And one of those is actually going to be the topic for today's video, and that is this first one here, The Art of Murder. If you know me, if you know my body of work, you are aware that The Art of Murder is a film I made back in 2018. It was my first ever feature film, and it ran almost 90 minutes, I believe, and it was filmed entirely on iPhone, which, you know, to some people might seem very impressive, like, whoa, he's so innovative, he decided to use iPhone instead of his normal camera. But no, at the time, I only had an iPhone. I did not have a normal camera. I did not have any kind of equipment except for one phone and one tripod, and that was it. And a trench coat, which you see me wearing in the poster there, that my parents very generously got me as a gift because they saw the vision I had for that detective character. So, all in all, I just want to share how I managed to make a near feature-length film on iPhone and how I think, honestly, anybody can do it. So, before I get into this particular movie, I'll just go ahead and say I filmed a lot of stuff on iPhone. I filmed videos like this on iPhone. I filmed 25 horror movies, short horror movies on iPhone. I filmed several dozen superhero movies on iPhone that were just like kind of funny and goofy. And then a few more like professional ones also on iPhone. So I did a lot of work on iPhone because it was the only thing I had. And over there, I still have the phone, the 6 Plus or 6S or something that I used to do all those movies. And it worked just fine. It honestly did. But of course, the camera that I'm using now is multitudes better than using a phone. It is, I mean, if there's a camera that you want and it's in your budget, and you've been shooting on iPhone, like, go for it. But in this video, I'm going to break down how I actually used an iPhone resourcefully and got the best possible footage using a device that now would be considered completely amateur and old. So once again, this was a 6S or 6 Plus. I think a 6S, and now I have the X. So if you have an iPhone X or anything after the 6, the camera is substantially better. But with the 6, you get a fairly subpar camera. I mean, it captures HD, but nothing really more than that. Doesn't really do anything fancy whatsoever. So the biggest thing that I'll start off with here that applies to, I think, any medium of art is put the story first. So when you prioritize the story, then you make it work. So if you have a killer story, which in my opinion, I had a really good story for this movie. If you have a killer story, then that will take prominence over the visuals. People will not care quite as much about the quality of the video if the story that they're experiencing is really good. So that's the first thing you should do. Because if you have a story that's captivating and beautifully written and emotional and raw and real and true to you, and you can tell that the viewers can tell that you put your heart and soul into it, I mean, that is going to take prominence over the definition of the video and over just the aesthetics of the movie. It will. In my opinion, it does, because I mean, people can read a book which has, of course, no visuals whatsoever and still be pulled in by the story. So a story can be translated between mediums and still affect people. And then when you get to like a book, for instance, since I'm also a writing guy, I'll talk about this for a minute. The mechanics of the book are very important. The style of writing is very important. There's certain writers that have really distinct styles that make them more enjoyable, but even if you were somebody who didn't know how to write very well, didn't know all the spelling and grammar, the story still exists independently of that. Anybody of any level of education with any level of technology or experience can come up with a cool idea. Anybody can do that. So once you have that idea, you're good to go. You're going to draw people in. For The Art of Murder, my idea was a twist on a classic murder story, a classic whodunit with my own original twists and turns. So the idea was that the detective is a teenager, played by me, and the person who's murdered is a comic book artist. Hence the title having the word art in it, the art of murder. It's art is like thematically woven throughout the story. So that in itself, I think, is pretty cool. And then I also introduce a lot of characters that I think are really cool. And one of the coolest things about this movie is how it actually sets the stage for the next projects in the series, which build on the universe and make it even bigger and crazier. So to me, this was more than just a movie. This was the first chapter in a saga. And I was so confident in all the components of this story that I went with it. And I'm obviously really happy with the end result. So whenever you are filming on a budget, when you only have an iPhone, one thing that's really good to do is make yourself the lead actor, which is what I did. And I do that in a lot of my stuff, because whenever you are a key part of the movie, then you simply have more flexibility. You can just film like whenever you want, basically. I mean, I have the trench coat over there. I could just go outside, bring my phone, film something. And the thing is, if I'm like, hey, this shot doesn't look good, this shot is just kind of, this shot is not really visually doing it for me, I just do it again. And when it's just me, I can be out there for hours, do whatever I want. So having yourself as the lead actor, or even just any pivotal character in the movie, that is super important, I think, because then you just have unlimited opportunities to film and get the shot perfect. So I also made the story so that it was mostly just 2-person scenes for the most part, sometimes 3. So the idea is my character, the detective, goes around to all these different people and talks to them each individually. So standardly, a scene in that movie would just have 2 actors, me and the other person. So it is very difficult, to get people to film. It is very difficult to arrange a large group for filming. There are just always scheduling conflicts, and it's always harder than you think it'll be. So knowing that you're filming on a budget, knowing that you're trying to get this story to fill a 90-minute runtime, you have to be realistic about what scenes you can actually film. So what I did was I had a lot of the scenes where it was me and one other person, because I was very confident I could do that. I was very confident I could bring my phone with me to meet up with somebody, and we could just film, and it worked. I mean, a lot of those scenes were not specific like filming dates that we had planned. It was me hanging with a friend, and I brought my trench coat, I brought my phone, and I brought my tripod, and we made it work. And so whenever you are filming with an iPhone, that always actually makes it easier, because it's just, you don't have to bring a whole setup. You can just bring the phone sometimes. You don't even need the tripod on occasion. So to build off my last point, it is super important to turn your friends into actors. I have done that with a lot of my friends. I mean, I've never really met anybody who was super enthusiastic about acting in the movies and was just like, yes, cast me, get me out there, get me filming. I'll do method acting. I'll do whatever you need. Like, there's not many people like that. There have been people who have volunteered to be in my movies and said that they're interested in acting in general, but typically it's the other way around. Typically I meet someone, I get to know them, and then I'm like, hey, I do movies. You seem like a really cool person. Would you want to be in a movie? I would just give you the script, feed you your lines. We'd get a scene done. You'd be in the movie. It'd be cool. And more often than not, people will say yes to that, as long as it's not some preposterous character. The preposterous characters, the crazy villains and monsters and stuff that requires costumes and makeup and all that, and accents and all that wild stuff, I save that for my good friends who are willing to do that for me. But for my more casual friends and people who aren't really super comfortable acting on screen, I just give them a nice simple script, and we knock it out, and it's always a good time. As a director, you have to make people feel comfortable, make people feel good about their acting, and just don't put too much pressure on people. Like, understand that it's just a fun project. If you're filming it on an iPhone, it is just a fun project. You're not necessarily a professional yet, and so you're just doing this with who you can. And people will surprise you. People will respond well to kindness and enthusiasm and positive reinforcement. Like, people will be more willing to take on a character or give their acting their all whenever you are encouraging and making it a fun experience for them. But when I say turn your friends into actors, I mean that quite literally. 2 of my best friends, George and Noah, they started out with not really caring too much about acting, never having acted in anything. And now, a couple years later, through all the projects I've made them do for me, they're amazing actors. Like, I mean, I could cast them in any role, I honestly feel like, and they would do amazing jobs. They have truly, truly grown tremendously. I mean, I think the biggest growth was with George, and this is not like, I'm not talking bad about him whatsoever. In the beginning, he wasn't that great of an actor. He kind of just played himself, which is, I think, most people's default. But a couple years later, I mean, he is killing it. He just will come up with lines on the spot. He'll just develop these like character traits, these little mannerisms and stuff, depending on who he's playing. I mean, it's incredible. So I didn't even teach him to do that. I just put him in a bunch of roles that I created, and he just naturally adapted to that and became an amazing actor. So like I was saying, positive reinforcement and just making sure people have a good time, like that will get you way further than you think. So on that same token, if you're not willing to pay for actors and you just want to use your friends for actors, you probably aren't willing to pay for locations or sets. So you have to use locations that are free to you. And for me, that's mostly outdoor locations, just public spaces, but also indoor places can be good too. So in The Art of Murder, there's a scene in a bowling alley, and one side of the bowling alley was completely dark and was not being used by anyone, and a friend and I just went over there. It wasn't blocked off or anything, and we just filmed, and it worked out really well. So you can always sort of find these little places where it's not too busy, there's not too many people to disrupt you, and you can just get a cool scene done. Generally speaking, my budget for my movies is $0. I do not pay for actors. I do not pay for sets. I use the equipment I have. I typically don't buy anything new for specific projects unless it really needs it. And I also tend to use the props that I have. I feel like I can be pretty resourceful with my props. So in general here, I feel like the guideline for budget filmmaking is just be resourceful. Use what you have, use who you have, and where you have. Just whatever's free to you, whatever is accessible to you, use it. Like, don't be afraid to ask people. Don't be afraid to go to random places and film in public. If you have a story in your mind, get it done. You can do it. Now, going back specifically to the iPhone, right? The iPhone is a pretty good camera. It has decent stabilization. It's not like terribly shaky. And if you have it on a tripod, it works wonders. Now, I didn't always have a tripod. In some of my old movies, there was never more than one person on screen, because if I was filming a 2-person scene, one person was holding the phone while the other person talked, and then you'd trade off. I'd hand the person the phone, they'd film me, they'd hand it back, I'd film them. That's how we used to record our lines, because I didn't even have a tripod then. And you know what? I think those look just fine. The biggest downside of the iPhone is there's no depth of field, there's no sort of cool perspectives, there's really none of that. You can only It's a very flat video. So you can get all kinds of crazy angles, which is very important. You have to get a diversity of angles. George filmed a scene on the iPhone at the end of The Art of Murder where he circles me, and that worked really well. There's also scenes in The Art of Murder where I'm walking and the camera follows me. And then you have to get a cool variety of close-ups and far-away shots and all that stuff. Just like with a normal camera, the iPhone is capable of getting lots of different shots. You just have to know when and where to get these shots. So I'm a big fan of close-ups. I like lots of cool dramatic close-ups. And the iPhone does that just fine, of course. You can also get cool panning shots on the iPhone, just kind of, showcasing the environment. Something you got to be careful of is, if you're like me, you like to get close-up shots on things as well. If you notice in my movies, I have lots of foliage shots of leaves blowing and stuff. Now, those can look really good and artistic when you have a professional camera, but they can also look not so good if you have a phone. So the thing is, in my mind, when I was taking shots on my phone of, let's say, like water running like us on the side of the street, I was like, wow, this is going to be beautiful, because I would picture in my mind like, a movie scene where there is water running. And the thing is, on an iPhone, you don't really get that movie level, cinematic effect. You get just kind of a view like someone's just looking down at the water running by the sewer. Like, you don't really get that cool effect where you see the texture and the ripples of the water because it's so close up and it just kind of fades into the distance. That is an effect you can achieve on a camera, but not necessarily on an iPhone. So keep in mind that what you visualize it'll look like is not always what it's going to look like on an iPhone. Because I love getting shots of trees and shots of flowers and even just grass swaying, and that looks really cool on a camera because it can focus on the intricate details of just one leaf or one flower or one blade of grass and then blur out the rest. But an iPhone, it might make your shot too crowded if you just have all this greenery in it. So that kind of stuff, close-ups on nature or on objects or on items, that looks much better on a camera. So in my opinion, you shouldn't do too many of those kind of close-ups when you're just using an iPhone. Another way to make your footage really pop is color grading. So I understand that not everybody has access to softwares where you can do really cool color grading. I use Premiere Pro, and I'm very lucky that I don't have to pay the full fee, because through my dad's company, I get to leech off of his Creative Cloud account and use Premiere Pro, and that has built-in really cool filters under the Lumetri color section. So if you do have Premiere or you have the Creative Cloud, highly recommend using the Lumetri color filters and then adjusting them accordingly to make them really exactly the colorful effect that you want on your video. Now, if you don't have Premiere Pro, if you're using iMovie, that's okay too, because I used iMovie for a very long time. I started off literally using iMovie on my phone. I didn't even have the computer app, and that's crazy. Once I started using it on the computer, I became really good at it, and I became accustomed to that, and then I got Premiere Pro, and I'm like, wow, Premiere Pro has a lot more stuff. There's a lot more things you can do with Premiere Pro, and I realized how basic iMovie really was. Now, iMovie still has its perks. It's nice and simple, it's super user-friendly, and sometimes I'll still use iMovie just for really basic edits when I don't need to do anything more. But I always put it in Premiere at the end because Premiere has better color grading. But in iMovie, a lot of people don't realize you can use more than just the basic filters. You can actually adjust the saturation, the brightness, the darkness, the vibrance, all that stuff is available to adjust for any clip in iMovie. So don't just slap a filter on there in iMovie, because there's only like 5 to 10 filters that actually might look good on a real movie. So just mess around until the color looks as good as you can. It's just really important not to release the movie or finalize the movie without adjusting the color grading at all, because the coloration is what will make your footage look like it's not just filmed on iPhone. Like this could have been filmed on a camera because, it looks more pristine, or it looks more cinematic now that you've adjusted the lighting and the color. So let's go back one more time to the story. Now, like I said, never compromise. Whenever you have a story, there is always a way to do it. But in this case, for a 90-minute film, I could not fill it with all outer space stuff. I could have used my green screen, but it wouldn't have been terribly convincing. What I'm saying here is that if you ground your story in reality and make it all stuff that actually could happen, it is much easier to film. Whenever most of the characters are just humans, whenever it's a mystery rather than a sci-fi space opera or crazy fantasy adventure, it is easier to be resourceful. So for a feature film, I recommend doing something in a genre that is more easy to execute. But if you have a vision for something and you think you can pull it off with your very limited budget, then do it. I'm always open to creative solutions to those kind of things. I'm working on a movie right now that is a crazy fantasy adventure, and I filmed the entire thing in front of a green screen. Absolutely everything. Nothing was filmed in the real world. So there's always ways to do it. And if you get creative, you can always make it happen. But definitely, limiting the amount of effects I had to use and limiting the amount of crazy wild environments that were necessary made it easier to make a 90-minute film on an iPhone with a low budget. And finally, one last thing that made this movie feel more like an actual movie was having a premiere with friends and the people who were in the film. So at the end of that project, I got everybody together who was in the movie, or everyone who could attend anyways. Even then, it's hard to get everyone in the same room together. But most of the actors and actresses were able to come. We all sat together in my house. We played the movie, had popcorn for everybody, had little goodie bags that had memorabilia from the movie and tokens of my appreciation to everyone for acting in it, as well as handwritten letters, just thanking everybody for being part of the process. That's super important too, because one, it makes people want to come back. It makes people want to do the movies again, and it shows them that it matters to you. And then on a more personal level, it makes it feel more like a real movie. If I just throw it up on YouTube and that's the end of it, then all that work kind of doesn't really have a climax. So having a premiere, making an event out of the release of the movie, makes it seem more professional outwardly, but also makes it feel to you like you did something. And you did. If you make a 90-minute movie, if you make a 9-minute movie, it's still cool. It's awesome. Make a thing out of it. Celebrate it. All art should be celebrated. And I am very proud of this movie that I created here. And all the following movies. And I'm still clearly celebrating it today by trying to teach people how it can be done. You can film a movie on an iPhone. You can edit on a budget. You can get actors when you don't know any actors. There's always ways to do it. So don't ever think you can't be a filmmaker, because I believe anybody can be a filmmaker. It all starts with having that idea. So let me know if you have an idea for a movie that you'd like to do and you want to film it on your smartphone. I'll support you however I can. And let me know if you found this video informative or helpful. I really appreciate everybody watching. This has been Keeping It Keilan with your man Keilan. Check out The Art of Murder if you haven't. Subscribe if you haven't, obviously. And everybody, have an awesome day. Keilan out.